When a stranger dies in Nero Wolfe's office wearing Archie Goodwin's name, identity itself becomes the deadliest riddle in Manhattan. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. The officer who carried my name. The man at my door was wearing my name on his badge and a bullet crease on his chin that said he'd earned it. I'd just come back from a milk run, literally. Fritz had forgotten to restock, and since I occasionally indulged the white poison, I'd volunteered to walk 2 blocks to the all-night delicatessen. It was raining, the kind of drizzle that doesn't commit to being weather, just a damp insinuation. By the time I reached the brownstone, the front steps looked slick enough to qualify for ice dancing. That's when I saw him, hat low, overcoat darker than the night, hand hovering near the holster on his hip, like he was posing for a recruitment poster. "Evening," I said. "If you're selling subscriptions, the cook handles our magazines." The stranger tilted his head. "Sergeant Archibald Goodwin, NYPD. I froze halfway up the steps. "Try that again. Slowly. The name part." He flipped open a badge with the kind of pride that makes you suspect the engraving's new. Sure enough, it read Sergeant Archibald Goodwin. Below it was the precinct number, and under that, my own address. "Well," I said, "I always wanted a twin. I just didn't expect him to carry a gun." He smiled faintly, though the corners of his mouth looked brittle. "You're the private operative who works for Nero Wolfe." "I've been accused." "Then we'd better talk inside." Normally, I don't bring armed strangers into Wolfe's home turf after midnight, especially ones claiming to be me. But curiosity is my fatal flaw. I held the door, gestured him in, and followed close enough to stop him if he sneezed wrong. The smell of rain gave way to the faint, civilized aroma of Fritz's late-night beef consommé drifting from the kitchen. The man's shoes squeaked on the linoleum as I steered him toward Wolfe's office. The lights were low, just the green shade of Wolfe's desk lamp burning. The globe glowed like a single eye waiting for confessions. "Nice place," he said, scanning the room. "You live here?" "Only when the rent's due." He didn't laugh. He reached into his coat and produced a manila envelope, sealed, edges softened by damp. "This is about a case that connects to your army record. Belgrade, 1944. That was enough to tighten a wire somewhere in my spine. "Belgrade? You've got the wrong Goodwin. I was in London counting typewriter ribbons, not bullets." He gave a tired smile. "That's what it says now." "Meaning what?" He started to answer, then winced. A bead of sweat rolled down from the cut on his chin. "Meaning..." I didn't get the rest because the words turned into a gurgle. His knees buckled. The envelope slipped from his fingers. I lunged forward, caught him under the arms and lowered him to the carpet just as his hat rolled away. His face was pale as pastry dough. "Hey," I said, shaking him. "If you're going to impersonate me, you'll need better stamina." No response. I touched his wrist. The pulse was running like a scared rabbit. Then it stopped. The bell cord hung at my right. I yanked it so hard Wolfe could probably feel it upstairs. The man was gone before Fritz's footsteps padded down the hall. Fritz took one look at the body and gasped something in Swiss that sounded like a recipe for damnation. Wolfe's elevator hummed. Seconds later, he arrived in full displeasure. Yellow silk robe, black suspenders, and a glare that could have sterilized surgical instruments. "Archie." He stopped dead in the doorway. "What is that?" "This," I said, "is a gentleman who claims to be me." Sadly, his timing was bad. Wolfe advanced to the edge of the carpet, nostrils flaring like he could smell the impropriety. "You insist on besmirching my carpet with corpses bearing your label." Technically, he walked in under his own power. "Pfui." Wolfe leaned on his desk, inspecting the body without kneeling. "Is he dead?" "As a cancelled check." "Then call Inspector Kramer, and, for decency, move him off the Axminster." I dragged the stranger by his shoulders onto the tile near the door. Fritz fetched a towel, laid it under the man's head as if he could still feel drafts. Wolfe had already seated himself, eyes shut, fingers templed. "Describe him." "About my height, darker hair, badge number 4187, face like a man who's argued with mirrors. He said something about my army record, Belgrade, 1944. Wolfe's eyelids twitched open. "Belgrade? I recollect no such posting in your dossier." "You and me both." The bell rang again, this time the doorbell. Fritz hesitated, but I waved him off. "I'll handle it. The night's already strange. Might as well see who else is borrowing my reputation." It was Kramer. He looked like a man who'd bitten a lemon to stay awake. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat onto his cigar. "Goodwin," he growled. "What now?" "Come in and see your namesake." He followed me to the office, spotted the body, and stopped short. "Who the hell? You tell me." He said he was Sergeant Archibald Goodwin. Kramer stared at me, then at Wolfe. "You playing games?" Wolfe spread a hand like an exasperated emperor. "Do I appear jocular, Inspector?" Kramer crouched beside the corpse, checked the pulse, and sighed through his nose. "Looks NYPD all right. If the badge checks out, Sergeant 9th Precinct, Interagency Fraud, that'll be one hell of a coincidence." "Or a frame," I said. He shot me a glance. "Don't flatter yourself." "Thanks, pal, but if someone's running around town doing impressions, I'd like a royalty." Fritz entered with a tray. Coffee for me, beer for Wolfe. Kramer sniffed the air. "Figures. Murder scene smells like lunch." "Dinner," Wolfe corrected. "You arrived late." Kramer ignored him, pulled an envelope from the floor, sealed but damp. "This yours?" "Not unless it's from the milk company." He slit it open with his penknife, pulled out a torn photograph. 5 men in army uniforms, their faces ghosted by time. One of them was me. "Recognize this?" "I'd say I'm the handsome one on the left, but I've never seen it." Kramer squinted. "Army records say you served stateside." "Still do," he grunted. "Maybe your double didn't." We went back and forth until Wolfe intervened, voice low and heavy as poured syrup. "Inspector, my employee's identity is not mutable. The man who perished here is an imposter, possibly a victim of whatever fraud your department investigates." Kramer straightened, wiped his hands. "You'll forgive me if I don't take your word." "I never offer it for gratis." Wolfe's tone went chilly. "You may, however, examine the premises at your leisure, provided your men tread lightly." Kramer jabbed his cigar toward me. "Don't leave town," I smirked. "Not even for milk." He left 2 uniforms to guard the scene. When they carried the body out, the rain had stopped, leaving a faint metallic smell that hung in the air. I turned to Wolfe. "You think someone's using my name for a cover?" He closed his eyes again. "A possibility. Or perhaps a coincidence, though coincidence is a fraud more subtle than most men's crimes." "That's poetic," I said. "Want me to check army records in the morning?" "No." He reached for his beer. "Tonight, you will type a memorandum recording every word the man spoke. 3.5 words. Belgrade, 1944, and meaning. Include your inferences." "Those could fill a novel." He didn't smile, but his voice softened. "Archie, this intrudes upon your history. I dislike that." "Don't worry. If my past wants me, it can call first." He sighed, signaling the end of conversation. "At 10 tomorrow, you will accompany me to the orchids. I find clarity among them. For now, bed." "Not even a bedtime story." He pointed at the typewriter. I started the memo while the office settled back into its familiar rhythm, the tick of the wall clock, the rustle of Wolfe's sleeve as he lifted his glass. When I finished, I stacked the pages neatly and looked at the empty doorway where the corpse had been. Whoever the dead man was, he'd walked in wearing my name and died for it. I wasn't sure yet whether that was irony or advance notice. Wolfe drained his beer, set the glass down with surgical precision, and said quietly, "Turn out the light when you go up." I did, but for a long time afterward, I stood in the dark hall, staring at the spot where my name had died on another man's badge. An hour after they'd hauled the body away, Kramer's knock came back, the kind that can make Wolfe's orchids wilt faster than bad fertilizer. It wasn't a polite knock either. It had the rhythm of a man drumming on a coffin he didn't order. By the time I opened the door, the rain from the previous hour had turned to a misty film that looked like the city trying to forget something. Kramer stood there with a cigar welded to his lip and a trench coat that had lost its war with gravity. Behind him came Pearlie Stebbins, same expression as always, like he'd been told fun was illegal, and he intended to enforce it. They brushed past me without ceremony. "Evening, Goodwin," Kramer said, though the tone suggested it wasn't. "Where's the stiff?" "Taken away, Inspector." He was shedding on the carpet. "Don't get cute." He peeled off his wet hat and slapped it on the hall table. "We've checked the badge. The man's a real cop. Sergeant Archibald Goodwin, 9th Precinct, attached to the Interagency Fraud Unit. So, you want to tell me why a police sergeant with your name died in Nero Wolfe's office?" I'd love to, I said, but I charge for identity consultations, city rates plus overtime. Stebbins snorted. You're a real card, huh? Full deck, I said, except maybe one joker short tonight. Kramer stalked into Wolfe's office, trailing the odour of rain and tobacco. Fritz had already aired the place and turned up the lamps. The carpet was bare except for the faint depression where the fake Goodwin had decided to make his exit from earthly affairs. Wolfe sat behind his desk, the picture of immovable civilization in a world full of drafts. "Inspector," he said, voice smooth as aged brandy, "I regret the hour and the circumstance, but not your visit. Pray be seated." Kramer ignored the invitation, lighting his cigar instead. The flame threw a yellow flicker over his face, deep lines, weary eyes, and a day that had lasted 40 hours. "You realize how this looks?" Wolfe's brow rose a millimeter. "Perception is a mutable commodity. Facts, less so." Kramer exhaled a gust of smoke that could have fogged a mirror. "Fact 1. A cop dies in your house. Fact 2. He's carrying credentials that say he's your legman here. Fact 3. The real Archie Goodwin is alive, smart-mouthed, and not under arrest. Yet." "That last," Wolfe murmured, "is the most encouraging." I grinned. "Thanks, boss. Always heartwarming to feel indispensable." Stebbins opened a small evidence envelope and dumped its contents on the desk, one service revolver and a tiny notebook wrapped in cellophane. His gun, no prints, wiped clean. Kramer jabbed the cigar at me. "Maybe yours." "Sorry," I said. "I don't do housework." Wolfe tugged at his lower lip. "A weapon bereft of fingerprints is like a confession unsigned, suggestive but inconclusive. And the notebook?" Kramer flipped it open. "Just 3 initials on the last page. CCM mean anything to you?" "Depends," I said. "Could be a radio station, a shipping firm, or the guy who invented chewing gum." "Shut it," Kramer said automatically, though the edge had softened. Wolfe leaned forward an inch, the equivalent of another man leaping onto the table. "Inspector, I trust you have verified that the deceased's credentials are genuine." "Too genuine. Precinct confirms the number, signature, photo, everything, except the sergeant who owned them's been on assignment upstate for 6 months." "Then," Wolfe said mildly, "someone has duplicated not only the badge but the man. A remarkable industry." Stebbins grumbled. "Or maybe your boy here cooked it up for publicity." I spread my hands. "Pearly, if I wanted publicity, I'd have picked a better corpse. Something in season." Kramer ignored us both, pacing the rug like a bear with arthritis. "I don't like coincidences, Wolfe. You got a dead cop using your assistant's name, army papers mentioned, maybe fraud money floating around. Smells like a racket." Wolfe pressed the bell cord. Fritz appeared, calm as a priest, bearing a tray with coffee for me and chilled beer for Wolfe. Kramer waved away the offer of civility, but Fritz left a clean ashtray anyway. Wolfe sipped, set the glass precisely on its coaster. "Inspector, the semblance of my employee's identity was likely used to approach some channel of fraud your department investigates. Whoever orchestrated it may intend to discredit Mr. Goodwin, or, more troublingly, myself." Kramer grunted. "You figure somebody wants to smear you?" "Among other indignities," Wolfe said. I took a gulp of coffee. "If they start selling Nero Wolfe impersonator kits, I'm leaving town." Wolfe gave me a narrow look. "Archie, restraint." "Sure, I'll restrain myself to a phone call." I reached for the desk phone. Wolfe's eyebrows collided. "To whom?" "Lon Cohen at the Gazette. I'll leak the headline. Police investigate man for impersonating himself. Might amuse the public and maybe flush whoever planted my double." "That," Wolfe said with glacial diction, "is an idiotic jest." "Probably," I said, "but idiotic jests have longer legs in print than police reports." Kramer snapped. "Don't you dare put that out." "Relax, Inspector. Lon owes me dinner. He won't print till morning." I dialed anyway, murmured enough for Lon to chew on, and hung up. Wolfe inhaled through his nose, the prelude to a thunderstorm. "Your levity is execrable. Yet," he paused, eyes narrowing in thought, "it may inadvertently serve. If the masquerade was designed to bait notice, publicity could precipitate a response." Kramer puffed irritably. "If I get phone calls from reporters, Wolfe, I'm coming back with a warrant." Wolfe inclined his head. You will not need one. I shall inform you of developments as I see fit. Developments? Indeed. The deceased's connection to wartime records interests me. Fraud rooted in post-war reconstruction often involves falsified personnel files. That is within the realm of, my professional curiosity. Kramer eyed him. You planning to work this case? I plan, Wolfe said, to preserve my household from contagion. If that requires deduction, so be it. Kramer relit his cigar, muttering, Every time I come here, you're running your own precinct out of that chair. Then, Wolfe said, consider me an unpaid adjunct. I leaned back, hands behind my head. Maybe you two should form a partnership. Kramer and Wolfe, crime solved while you wait. Kramer growled, but the corner of his mouth twitched, a near miracle. Don't push it, Goodwin. Just keeping morale up. Stebbins flipped through the notebook again. Could be initials for a company. Central Commodity Markets, maybe. Or, I offered, somebody's monogrammed cufflinks. Kramer barked, We'll run it down. He pocketed the evidence, then looked back at Wolfe. You think the guy was poisoned? Symptoms suggest it, Wolfe said. A sweating, collapse, rapid cessation. The medical examiner will confirm. And you just let him walk in here? Wolfe's voice chilled. He was admitted by my employee. The decision was unfortunate but understandable given the man's badge and name. Kramer's gaze shifted to me. Next time, ask for 2 forms of ID. I will, I said. Preferably with fingerprints still attached. That earned a grunt from Stebbins that might have been laughter in another species. Kramer stubbed out his cigar. All right, Wolfe. For once I'll say it. You might be useful. You've got reach we don't. That, Wolfe said softly, is the first intelligent remark this evening. Don't let it go to your head. Wolfe spread his hands. My head inspector is well furnished but never overcrowded. The exchange hung in the air, faintly cordial under the smoke. Fritz re-entered, collecting empty cups. Wolfe checked his watch. 12:27. If your inquiry is concluded, Inspector, I must insist upon adjournment. I rise early for my orchids. Kramer blinked. You rise? Metaphorically. The elevator assists. He shook his head, weary amusement leaking through. Fine, but keep your pet detective on a leash. Until I say otherwise, he doesn't leave the city. Where would I go, I said. My double already took the trip. Kramer's eyes softened just enough to show there was still a man behind the badge. Watch yourself, Goodwin. Whoever set this up might not stop at one corpse. That was as close to friendly as he got. He nodded once to Wolfe. I'll wait for your report. Promptly, Inspector, Wolfe said, and meant it. His version of a handshake. They left together, their silhouettes swallowed by the hall light. The door closed with the solid thud of law leaving the premises. Silence stretched. Wolfe reached for his beer. The glass chimed faintly against the coaster. Archie? Yeah? You are too combustible for impersonation intrigues. You will remain here tomorrow. I smiled. Translated from the Latin, that's paternal affection, isn't it? He glared, but there was a spark behind it that wasn't annoyance. Confound you. I'll take that as yes. He drained the rest of his beer, exhaled contentedly, and pushed back from the desk. That will be all for tonight. Lock up. I watched him waddle toward the elevator, the silk of his robe catching the lamplight like a warning beacon. The cage doors slid shut with their usual sigh, leaving me alone with the faint perfume of beer, orchids, and cigar smoke, the scent of civilization fending off chaos. I glanced at the empty space where the corpse had been and muttered, Here's hoping the next guy who borrows my name leaves it in better condition. Then I killed the lights. The War Department Records Office was where old secrets went to die of boredom. The place smelled of carbon paper, cold coffee, and something more terminal, bureaucracy. If Purgatory had a filing system, it would look exactly like that. Endless grey cabinets, weary clerks, and a clock that ticked as though it was paid by the hour. I'd been there 15 minutes, and already the walls looked ready to testify under duress. Saul Pantzer stood near the entrance, pretending to be a messenger, flat cap tilted low. He could have blended into wallpaper if it had a 5 o'clock shadow. My job was to charm the living out of the dead files, and Saul's was to make sure I didn't get buried with them. A middle-aged secretary with a steel perm and eyes like sharpened paperclips looked up from her desk. The brass plate read, Miss Loring, Records Division. She gave me the kind of look reserved for tax audits and door-to-door evangelists. "Yes?" she said. I flashed what I hoped passed for a winning grin. "Archie Goodwin, private inquiry agent. I need a few details from your 1944 personnel files. War correspondence, Belgrade Division." Her pencil paused in midair. "Belgrade?" "That's the word. Capital of mystery, home of unfiled paperwork." She adjusted her glasses, examining me the way a scientist looks at an interesting but possibly venomous specimen. "You said your name was Goodwin?" "That's right, Archie Goodwin. Why?" She hesitated, then leaned forward conspiratorially. "That's peculiar." "Lady," I said, "you'd be surprised how often I hear that." "No, I mean, there was a Captain Goodwin here in 44, ordered duplicate personnel photographs for a Balkan operations roster. I remember because he flirted outrageously while filling out Form 27B. I grinned. Sounds like my kind of fellow. Was he handsome? Moderately, less mouthy. Then definitely not me. She ignored the quip, rising from her chair and disappearing into the back room. I watched her skirt vanish between filing cabinets and looked over at Saul. He was reading the posted regulations as if they were scripture. "You catching this, Saul?" I murmured. He didn't look up. "Catching, recording, and alphabetizing. Keep talking. She's the type who likes the sound of her own competence." A good minute later, Miss Loring returned carrying a manila folder like it was radioactive. She set it down on her desk, pulled out a photo print folded in half, and there I was. 5 men in khaki, background a blurred war zone, smiles too forced to last. The right half matched the torn piece found in the brownstone. My face looked younger but unmistakable. Beneath it, a scrawled signature, AG, Belgrade Division. I stared at it long enough to feel the room tilt. "That," I said, "is a neat trick, considering I spent 1944 wrestling typewriters in London." She frowned. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure of what I didn't do. Fighting Nazis would have made better cocktail chatter." Miss Loring's pencil hovered again. "Funny thing, you're the second person this week to ask for these records." My eyes narrowed. "Really?" She nodded. "Yesterday morning. Had clearance papers. Looked official. Claimed to be from Army Intelligence. Polite man, British accent, maybe 40. Did he sign the register?" "Of course." She flipped open a logbook, running a finger down the neat entries until she stopped. "Here. Clearance code D1412. Name, well, now that's odd. It's smudged." I took a look. Smudged wasn't the word. Someone had neatly erased the name and pressed over it with enough graphite to fake age. It read simply, "Authorized per directive." Saul drifted closer, his shadow falling across the page. "Photostat that, Archie," he muttered. I nodded and asked Miss Loring for the office copier. She bristled. "That's restricted use." "Then restrict it to me," I said, flashing my license. "This is part of a police cooperation matter." That phrase works wonders on bureaucrats. It's like chloroform for suspicion. Within minutes, I had a copy of the smudged log entry and the photograph's reverse, where faint chemical notations hinted the print had been duplicated recently. I thanked her and reached for my coat. "Miss Loring, if the gentleman comes back, don't mention this visit. He's got the kind of clearance that leaks." She frowned but didn't argue. "Is this dangerous?" "Not if you stay alphabetized." Back in the corridor, the fluorescent lights hummed like irritated bees. Saul fell into step beside me. "That photo's trouble, Archie." "Everything's trouble lately. If my double fought Nazis, I'd at least like the medals back." He didn't smile. "You think it ties to that dead cop?" "Either that or I'm collecting fan mail from the afterlife." We reached the front lobby. The clerk at the counter, a jittery kid with an Adam's apple trying to make a name for itself, was hunched over a typewriter. His eyes darted up as we passed. "Hey, sir?" "Yes?" He swallowed hard. "You were looking at file 219B, right? Someone already requisitioned that file last night. Left instructions to destroy the duplicate." I stopped cold. "Destroy it?" He nodded, sweating. "Said it was a duplication error. Gave me the same clearance code, D1412. Saul's voice was low. "Archie, let's leave. Quietly." We stepped out into the daylight, though it looked more like diluted grey than sun. Midtown traffic coughed by, horns impatient with the human condition. We ducked into a diner across the street. I ordered coffee. Saul took his black, like his hat. "You got Wolfe on the line?" he asked. I nodded and dropped a nickel into the payphone. The operator patched me through. The receiver crackled with Wolfe's basso impatience. "Archie, where are you?" "Playing hide-and-seek with Uncle Sam's filing cabinets. Found something." "Proceed." I summarized. The secretary, the photo, the forged clearance. There was a silence so deep I could almost hear the orchids growing. "Archie," Wolfe said finally, "you will return immediately. This matter bears implications beyond your capacity for impetuous improvisation." Translation: "You're worried." "Indeed. Someone is fabricating a version of you I do not recognize. That is intolerable." I smiled despite myself. "Don't tell me you're sentimental." "Pfui, I am practical. Your person, however exasperating, is singularly irreplaceable. If you are erased from official record, my affairs will suffer intolerably." "Understood. My ego thanks you. Return at once. Soon as I pay for the coffee." "Archie," his tone sharpened, "you will take a cab?" "Yes, sir." I hung up and looked at Saul. "The general has spoken." Saul shrugged. "He's right. Someone's rewriting you, maybe to cover their own tracks." Then they picked the wrong eraser. We split up outside, the better to avoid being followed. I took a taxi uptown, window half open to let in the stale wind of honest deceit. The city rolled by, steam grates exhaling, neon winking like tired eyes. Somewhere between 5th and Madison, the driver squinted at me in the mirror. "Hey, didn't I see you in the papers?" he said. "Probably," I told him. "Depends if it was the obituaries." By the time I reached the brownstone, Fritz had just announced lunch to an empty dining room. Wolfe's voice boomed from the office. "Archie?" I entered with the folder under my arm. Wolfe was at his desk, ringed by neat stacks of documents, an island of order in a swamp of trouble. He didn't look up. "Your report." I laid the photo before him. He studied it, eyes narrowing behind the gold-rimmed lenses. "Remarkable," he murmured. "The forgery is skillful." "It's not a forgery," I said. "At least the photograph isn't. Paper's authentic vintage, same emulsion as wartime stock." "Then someone acquired the negatives." "Or the originals. The secretary said a British-accented visitor ordered these copies 2 days ago using fake clearance." "British," Wolfe repeated. "A clue, perhaps, or a misdirection?" "Maybe both." He sighed, leaning back. "The nexus of fraud and espionage is ever fertile. Post-war profiteers perhaps laundering funds through dummy veterans' identities. Your name used as conduit." "That'd explain the dead cop," I said. "Maybe he got too close." Wolfe drummed his fingers on the armrest. "Then we must proceed delicately. The enemy is faceless but inventive." I smiled thinly. "Join the club." He ignored that. "You will prepare a typed summary of your findings, double-spaced. Deliver it to me before dinner." I saluted. "Anything else, boss?" "Yes. Until I ascertain the scope of this abomination, you will avoid all contact with government offices. Your capacity for spontaneous wit does not blend well with armed men." I grinned. "You're worried again." He lifted a brow. "I am conserving assets." "Same thing." He reached for the bell cord. Fritz appeared, bearing a tray with beer and sliced sausage. The smell filled the room like diplomacy done right. Wolfe poured, sipped, and looked at me over the rim. "Archie, someone is rewriting history. See that they do not edit you out entirely." "Working on it," I said. I went to the typewriter, rolled in a fresh sheet, and let the keys hammer out the truth, one clack at a time. Outside, a siren wailed up Lexington, and I couldn't tell whether it was chasing someone else or just coming for my shadow. Riverside Drive at night has a way of pretending it's Paris, but the illusion breaks as soon as the cab fare hits your wallet. The air smelled of money, martinis, and varnished lies. Saul Panzer sat beside me, expressionless as usual, cap tilted low. He looked like he'd been carved out of patience. We pulled up before a limestone tower with more doormen than tenants. The brass gleamed like gilt under the streetlights. The doorman gave me the once-over that comes standard when your shoes cost less than the lobby carpet. I told him we had an appointment with Mrs. Lena Goodwin, widow of the late Sergeant Archibald Goodwin. He blinked once, decided I was serious, and sent us up with the kind of silence that costs extra. The penthouse door opened on a perfume cloud thick enough to smuggle diamonds through. Mrs. Goodwin stood framed against the city's glitter. She was tall, brunette, and constructed for trouble. Her dress was black silk, simple enough to suggest she didn't need decoration. Her eyes measured people like she was pricing them for auction. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, her tone halfway between curiosity and irony, "and you've brought company." "Saul Panzer," I said. "He doesn't talk much, keeps the room symmetrical." Her mouth curved faintly. "You're the detective who works for Nero Wolfe. I read about the unfortunate incident." "Unfortunate's one word," I said. "He walked into our house and died using my name. That sort of thing can put a dent in a man's social life." She gestured toward a pair of armchairs that looked like they'd faint if anyone actually sat on them. "Please, I want to help if I can." The room was a catalogue of elegance. Pale walls, velvet drapes, a phonograph whispering a slow jazz number, and too many frame photographs. In every one, the fake sergeant stood beside someone important, generals, businessmen, even a senator. He smiled the way a man does when he's counting someone else's money. I pointed at one. "Your husband got around." Her tone hardened. "He was a hero. The army gave him commendations." "Sure," I said, "and the city gave him my name." She lit a cigarette, hands steady, exhaling with practiced grace. "You think he was an imposter?" "I think he wasn't what he said he was. That's different." Saul drifted to the dresser, his fingers tracing dust lines. He looked up at me, eyes flicking once toward a jewelry box. I nodded. Mrs. Goodwin caught it and smiled like she'd just won a chess game. "If you're looking for valuables, detectives, I assure you, there's nothing left worth stealing." "Then humour us," I said. "What was in that empty slot on the velvet?" Her lips thinned. "A locket. Gold. I mislaid it." Saul crouched, his voice low. "Initials CCM, right?" Her pupils flicked just once. "How did you?" "Lucky guess," I said. "Your late husband had a notebook with the same letters." She stared at me, then turned toward the window, letting the city light sketch her profile. "He told me it was from an army comrade. Carlton Mercer, I think. A good man. Dead now." "Everybody connected to your husband seems to share that hobby," I said. Her shoulders stiffened. "He was under strain. After the war, they used him for special assignments. I don't know what." I stood, walked over to the photographs again. "You met him after the war?" "Yes, at a veteran's benefit." "Which year?" 46. "Convenient. That's when the real Sergeant Goodwin went missing from his unit." She turned sharply. "What are you implying?" "Not implying, asking. Did you ever meet any of his army friends?" "No." "Anyone named Nash? Mercer? CCM?" "No." The word cracked through the jazz like a gunshot. Then she caught herself, smoothing her tone. "He didn't talk about the past. I respected that." Saul looked at me. "Archie," he said quietly, "take a look at this." He'd opened a desk drawer. Inside was a stack of letters, all written in the same precise hand. Each was addressed to L. Goodwin, but signed, "Your devoted husband, A.G." The postmarks were European: Paris, Geneva, Belgrade. I picked one up. "Mrs. Goodwin," I said, "your husband travelled a lot for a man who supposedly worked in city fraud investigation." She moved toward me, quickly, eyes blazing. "Those letters are personal." "So's murder." Her mouth trembled. "You have no right." "I've got every right," I said. "If the man in those pictures used my name to get away with something." She flung her cigarette into the ashtray, missing it. "He wasn't a criminal. He was running from people who wanted to destroy him." "Any of them British, with good manners and fake credentials?" She stared. "How do you know that?" "I'm clairvoyant. Also, I talk to secretaries." Her lips tightened. "He said, if anyone came asking about Belgrade, I should deny everything." "That's patriotic," I said, "but it's not helping your case." The room went quiet, except for the phonograph needle scratching the end groove. Saul turned it off. The silence afterward felt heavier than guilt. "Mrs. Goodwin," I said softly, "if you're protecting someone, don't. The police already know your husband's credentials were counterfeit. You can't salvage his reputation with perfume." She sank into a chair, looking smaller suddenly. I didn't know, she whispered. He told me he was working for intelligence, that the name changes were necessary. Lady, I said, if I had a nickel for every man who told that to a woman, I'd buy myself an intelligence service. She gave a weak laugh, then covered her face. He was kind to me, and now you're saying he never existed. Saul handed me the top photograph. The fake Goodwin stood beside a uniformed man labelled Charles C. Mercer, President, Carlton Central Metals. I felt the room tilt again. CCM. Your Lockett's namesake, I said. Who was Mercer? She hesitated. A business associate. They shared investments. In what? I don't know. I believed her, but belief and truth don't always dance to the same tune. We left her staring into the dark window where the city lights trembled like excuses. Downstairs, Saul said, You buying her act? If charm were evidence, I said, she'd hang for it. He grunted. I lifted a photo from the frame while she was weeping. Look. He handed it over. The back bore a date, 1947, wedding, St. Luke's. The husband's face matched the imposter's, but a note scrawled on the border read, Property of U.S. Army Archive, File 3821. By the time we got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair, eyes half shut, fingers steepled. Fritz had cleared away dinner. I gave him the report in full. He didn't interrupt, which was never a good sign. When I finished, he opened his eyes. Your judgment of women remains elastic. Beware the tensile strength. You mean I stretch easy, I said. Precisely. Saul dropped the purloined photo on the desk. Her husband's real name might not be Goodwin at all. Wolfe studied it, nostrils flaring. Indeed, Mr. Panther, excellent initiative. This inscription, File 3821, suggests official custody. If this photograph was private property, it was stolen. By her or him, I asked. Both, perhaps. He leaned back. Archie, have you verified the widow's marriage certificate? No. Do so tomorrow. The Bureau of Vital Statistics opens at 9. After that, consult Army records. Sure, I said. Want me to bring flowers to the widow while I'm at it? Phooey, your gallantry is misplaced. She may yet prove accessory. Then I'll bring handcuffs instead. He gave me a look that almost passed for amusement. Your levity is tedious, yet it may keep you alive. At that moment, Saul's phone buzzed from the hall. He stepped out, spoke briefly, and returned. News, he said. Checked my contact in Washington. The real Sergeant Goodwin, Lena's husband, died overseas in 44. So whoever she buried last year wasn't him. Wolfe's lids drooped. A fraud marrying a widow under her own dead husband's name. Elegant symmetry. Yeah, I said. Except the fraud's fraud got murdered in our office. Wolfe tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared with the late-night tray. Beer for Wolfe, coffee for me. The foam hissed like punctuation. Wolfe lifted his glass. To imposture, Archie, the sincerest form of flattery and the deadliest. I raised my cup. Here's hoping the next one doesn't use my name. He grunted approval, and the orchids upstairs caught the first whisper of the midnight hour as the city beyond the brownstone hummed its endless tune of secrets and sin. If patriotism had a smell, it would reek of cigars, cognac, and cheap bragging. The Columbia Officers Club was doing brisk business in all three. I'd worn a tuxedo borrowed from a friend of Ori's, and the expression of a man who enjoyed bad coffee and good secrets. My alias for the night was Captain Andrew Goodwin, cousin of the private investigator. If that didn't get me shot or saluted, nothing would. The club occupied 2 floors of mahogany gloom near Gramercy Park. Inside, brass plaques lined the walls, each engraved with a name the city had forgotten. The bar glittered, the jazz band murmured something inoffensive, and the crowd, silver-haired veterans in polished shoes, laughed a little too loud. The air carried the lazy arrogance of men convinced they'd already done their part for history. Saul Panther had infiltrated earlier as a delivery man. He was somewhere downstairs keeping an eye on the coat room. My job was to mingle. I made my first move on a circle of men comparing medals and mortgages. One of them, a broad fellow with a nose that had seen artillery, wore the same thin moustache as the man 2 rows over in the Belgrade photo. Captain Andrew Goodwin, I said, shaking his hand. Cousin of the late Sergeant Goodwin. You might have known him. Belgrade Division? The man stiffened. Belgrade? His eyes darted to the others. Never heard of it. He drained his drink too fast. Another man, a pale colonel with a florid neck, chuckled uneasily. Oh, we all knew a Goodwin or two, eh? Army was full of them. Sure, I said. But this one died inconveniently, pretending to be me. The table went silent. Glasses paused mid-air. The colonel's laugh wilted. The moustached man muttered something about making a phone call and stood up. He was halfway to the door before I'd finished my ginger ale. Saul intercepted him neatly near the coat check. I followed at a leisurely stroll, enough to look polite while hoping Saul didn't break him before I arrived. The moustached man thrust a claim ticket at the attendant, number 314. He snatched his coat and bolted for the side exit. Saul gave me a subtle nod, palming the duplicate ticket he'd switched. The only thing these heroes fight now, I muttered, is the IRS. I stayed long enough to grab a plate of lukewarm roast beef and pretend interest in a colonel's golf scores, then slipped out to meet Saul by the alley. He already had the briefcase. Tag 314, he said. Owner was in a hurry to leave it behind. Combination standard issue. We opened it in the shadow of a delivery truck. Inside were ledgers, neatly bound, pages coded in numeric sequences. A faint smell of machine oil clung to the paper. Profiteering records, Saul guessed. Army supplies siphoned somewhere. Let me guess. Belgrade, 1944. Could be. You want me to run this to Wolfe? Yeah. Tell him it's his kind of bedtime story, numbers and guilt. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was in his element, desk lamp lit, the orchids above murmuring faint perfume. He was on the phone, his tone cool and imperial. Yes, Colonel Marchand, he was saying, you will, of course, maintain discretion. The codes resemble post-war surplus manifests. Yes, indeed. Carlton Central Metals? Quite. He hung up and regarded me. Archie, your impetuous masquerade yielded fruit. Saul's the one who plucked it, I said. Briefcase, ledgers, probably enough cook numbers to feed an audit team for years. He nodded. Carlton Central Metals, abbreviated CCM, procured scrap shipments from army stockpiles, fraudulent invoices, falsified destinations. Your deserter tonight likely feared exposure. Then why bolt at my name? Guilt, Wolfe said simply. Names are mirrors, and some men loathe reflection. I dropped into the red chair. One problem, boss. The police still think our dead double was chasing something small-time. You're connecting it to war loot. Precisely. And I require corroboration. He pulled the bell cord. Fritz appeared, bearing a tray of chilled beer and cheese straws. Wolfe took a glass, gestured for mine to remain untouched. It is past midnight. Caffeine will suffice for you. You're a tyrant. A necessary one, he sipped. Inspector Kramer telephoned earlier. He requested an update and implied the department is tracing several unsolved homicides involving former supply officers. He will, of course, arrive momentarily. Of course, I said. He always times his visits to ruin digestion. At 12:42 the bell rang. Fritz admitted Kramer without preamble. The inspector entered, trench coat dripping, cigar clenched like a weapon. Evening, Wolfe. Goodwin. Inspector, Wolfe said. Beer? Kramer shook his head. No time. I just came from the DA. They've tied a dead metals broker, Mercer, to that CCM outfit you mentioned. Same initials from your stiff's notebook. That confirms my inference. Wolfe inclined his head gravely. Kramer exhaled smoke. I hate it when you're right. You need not hate it, Wolfe said dryly. It's a recurrent condition. Kramer ignored the jab, turning to me. Where'd you get those ledgers? I shrugged. A veterans reunion? Free buffet, live music, criminal panic, whole package. Kramer's eyes narrowed. You posing as your cousin again? Half-cousin, twice removed, he grunted. You ever take anything seriously? Sure, I said. Lunch at 1, dinner at 8. That cracked a reluctant smile, which he disguised as a cough. All right, Wolfe. The DA says if those ledgers check, they'll reopen the surplus racket cases. Maybe we can clear 3 bodies off the board. Then we are aligned, Wolfe said. Our objectives, justice and clarity, coincide. Don't get poetic, Kramer said. Just get results. He stubbed the cigar in my ashtray and stood. For once, Wolfe, I'll admit it. You might have the right angle. Keep me posted. He left without slamming the door, which from Kramer counted as affection. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed. He will not say it, Archie, but he respects my methods. Sure, I said, like a cat respects the can opener. He grunted, drained the last of his beer, and pushed the glass aside. Enough. Tomorrow we pursue Mercer's associates. For now, bed. Good idea, I said. All this patriotism's exhausting. He gave me one of his rare looks, a blend of irritation and concern. Archie, caution. These men killed to preserve illusion. Do not become one of their ghosts. Don't worry, I said, standing. I'm too loud to haunt. I killed the lights as he rose for the elevator, the last glow catching the gold crest on his beer glass. Upstairs, the orchids waited for their keeper. Downstairs, the city exhaled its smoky breath, and the ghosts of forgotten officers toasted each other in silence. Rain on corrugated metal sounds like guilt trying to confess. By the time I reached Carlton Central Metals, the street lamps were halos in the downpour, and the warehouse windows glowed like the eyes of tired sinners. 2 squad cars idled at the curb, steam curling off their hoods. I ducked under the awning, flashed my license, and was waved inside by a uniform who looked like he hadn't believed in sleep since Prohibition. The main office smelled of oil, ink, and last chances. Desks lined the floor in neat military rows, their typewriters silent as tombstones. At the far end, behind a frosted glass door lettered Charles C. Mercer. President, Kramer's voice rumbled low and sour. He glanced up as I entered, cigar clenched like a threat. Well, Goodwin, you've got timing. We just cracked the lock. The door hung open, splintered at the latch. Inside, Mercer sat behind his desk, head tilted at an angle that suggested business was permanently closed. Blood had found its way to the floor in a lazy arc. Somebody decided to close accounts, with interest, I said. Kramer's grunt could have meant agreement or constipation. Found him like this? Door locked from the inside, key gone, window bolted. What do you make of that? I make it inconvenient for the killer, which means it wasn't his first time. Stebbins shuffled papers on the desk, his bulldog face set in concentration. Boss, this telegram stub, Lena G., payment confirmed. That name ring bells? Enough to start a parade, I said. Lena Goodwin, widow of my double. Kramer's eyes flicked to me. You sure? Sure as mortgages. Mercer's in the same racket as that CCM we've been chasing. He ran the metals outfit feeding on army scraps. Kramer growled. I don't like coincidences that spell murder. Neither does Wolfe, I said. I moved to the phone on Mercer's credenza and dialed the brownstone. Fritz answered, his voice tight with formality. Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Wolfe is... Put him on, Fritz, this one's urgent. A moment later, Wolfe's voice came through, calm and heavy as always. Archie? Yes, sir. We've found Mercer. He's dead, behind a locked door. There was a pause long enough to hear the static breathe. Then, in that precise tone that could carve marble, the adversary is pruning the tree. You could say that. Kramer's here. Telegram addressed to Lena G. and payment confirmed. Indeed. You will return home immediately. Not yet. The police still need a witness who can spell telegram. Archie, Wolfe said sharply, you are meddling among murderers. Your name is already compromised. I will not... Relax. I've already been impersonated once today. Hard to hit the same target twice. That did it. His voice rose, rare thunder from Olympus. You will obey, confound you. Home. Now. Kramer raised an eyebrow. The great Nero Wolfe giving orders by long distance. Tell him to send flowers instead. Tell him yourself, I said, handing over the receiver. Kramer hesitated, then grunted into it. Wolfe. Yeah. Mercer's dead. Looks like an inside job. He listened, frowning. What? Yeah, we'll check. Goodwin's still breathing for now. He slammed the phone down and glared at me. He's right. You're leaving. My men will finish. I was starting to like the decor. Out, he barked, and stay where I can find you. Stebbins came over with a clipboard. Boss, there's no sign of forced entry except the lock we broke. Door was sealed from the inside. Maybe the guy had a key. Or a badge, Kramer said quietly. That earned my attention. You mean, he nodded grimly. Whoever did this walked right past the night guard, used police clearance to get in. The guard said the guy flashed credentials and told him to take a smoke break. He did. I whistled. So our killer's a cop. Kramer's jaw tightened. Could be, or somebody with access to the right wallet. The thought hung in the air, heavier than cigar smoke. Wolfe's voice replayed in my head. The adversary is pruning the tree. Only now the roots were growing under badges. Kramer looked at Mercer's corpse again, expression caught between anger and fatigue. If this ties to your Belgrade mess, Wolfe's theory might hold water, but it stinks to high heaven if my own boys are mixed in. You could always arrest yourself, I said. Watch it, Goodwin. We stood in the dim office while the rain drummed the windows like impatient fingers. The city outside kept moving, taxis, streetcars, lives unbothered by one more corpse in an iron empire. I pocketed nothing except a glance at that telegram stub, noting the postmark, Western Union, 9:15 p.m. Kramer saw me looking. Don't even think about it. That goes in evidence. I was thinking how neat Mercer kept his desk. A shame to ruin such order. He grunted. You and Wolfe are a matched set of headaches. Better than migraines. He gave me one last look, somewhere between warning and weary respect. Go home, Goodwin. Let Wolfe chew the numbers. I'll call if we scrape something useful. I left them to the body and the typewriters. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, turning the city's grime into a reflective mirror of itself. I lit a cigarette and hailed a cab, half expecting the driver to wear my face. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting, seated like judgment itself, hands tented beneath his chin. Fritz hovered in the doorway with the night tray, beer and cheese straws untouched. I gave him the rundown, ending with Kramer's hunch about the badge. Wolfe's eyes closed. So, corruption within the constabulary. That complicates matters. The adversary is pruning not merely the tree, but the orchard. Maybe, I said, but we're still the fruit they haven't picked. He opened one eye. Your metaphors are abominable. Sit. You will take dictation. Right now? Now, he said firmly, before more branches fall. I sat, rolled in paper, and began typing as thunder cracked somewhere over the Hudson. Some nights the brownstone feels more like a courtroom than a home. Wolfe presides from his throne behind the desk. I play the jury of one, and the orchids upstairs whisper their verdict. This was one of those nights. The air smelled of paper, ink, and Fritz's roast coffee, a combination I've come to associate with danger in its quieter form. Wolfe was behind his desk, mountainous and motionless, eyes half shut as I finished reading my notes from the Carlton Central fiasco. The only movement came from his finger tapping the armrest in slow, judicial rhythm. Archie, he said finally, our adversary is not inventing identities. He is refining them. Good trick, I said. Maybe he can teach the DMV. He ignored that. Each forged credential we've encountered, the badge, the military record, Mercer's telegram, originates from an authentic source. The forger is not outside the system but within it. Someone clerical, someone who controls the ink of truth. Meaning. Meaning, he said. Your name was altered not by imitation but by insertion. I whistled softly. So I've been officially unofficial. Swell. He opened his eyes, and they had that dangerous calm that made you wish for a fire alarm. You will review your army discharge papers. They're in the top drawer. Want me to salute first? Before he could reply, the door opened and Fritz entered, immaculate as ever, carrying the evening mail on a silver tray. A special delivery, Mr. Wolfe. Thank you, Fritz. Wolfe took the envelope, examined the handwriting, and frowned. No return address. The postmark, War Department, Washington, D.C. He slit it with a letter opener, unfolded the document inside, and froze. I stood. What is it? He handed it over. My name, Archibald Goodwin, typed clean across the top of an Army Service certificate, dated, sealed, and signed. It was perfect. Too perfect. I didn't order a reprint, I said, and I sure didn't earn this extra shine. Look closely. I did. Every letter was precise, official, until I noticed the serial number, off by 1 digit. Mine ended in 7, this one in 8. Somebody's doing me the courtesy of existing on paper, I said. I've been promoted, demoted, and duplicated, and I still don't get a pension. Wolfe's lips tightened. Archie, this is the keystone. The impostor who carried your name served as courier between fraud and command. Whoever altered this record authorized all the others. The phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's residence. Kramer's voice came through, rough but lacking its usual thunder. Goodwin, put Wolfe on. I did. Wolfe, Kramer said. I just got the lab report. Fingerprints from Mercer's office on that telegram stub. They match a missing police lieutenant. Guy vanished 6 months ago. Internal Affairs had him on the hook for bribery. Indeed, Wolfe said, tone mild but eyes alive. Then your corrupt lieutenant was the liaison, law enforcement supplying legitimacy. Kramer grunted. You may be right. I don't like it, but it ain't crazy. Keep me posted. The line clicked dead. I hung up. Well, there's our inside man. A ghost with a badge. Not merely a ghost, Wolfe murmured, but a paper ghost, one who edits existence as others edit reports. Your doppelganger was a courier, but his author remains hidden. He leaned back, the leather sighing under his weight. Archie, this case offends me, not because of its corruption, New York is fecund in that regard, but because it threatens you. Me? Your name, he said, your record, the bureaucratic edifice that confirms your reality. You are my most indispensable agent. Erasure, even bureaucratic, is intolerable. It was about as close to a Hallmark card as Wolfe ever got. I smirked. You're getting sentimental, sir. He scowled. Pfui, I am pragmatic. Sentiment is inefficient. Sure, I said. And you only keep orchids because they save on heat. He grunted, reaching for his beer. Enough levity. You will draft a memorandum summarizing tonight's conclusions for Inspector Kramer. Emphasize the clerical hypothesis and the involvement of law enforcement. I went to the typewriter and rolled in a sheet. Shall I add that my boss has begun to care about my existential continuity? Do so, he said, and I shall edit you personally. The keys clattered, filling the office with their steady percussion. Wolfe's beer glass clicked softly as he set it down. Outside, rain tapped the windows like polite persistence. When I finished, I signed the bottom and placed the sheet before him. He read it once, nodded approval, and reached for the bell cord. Fritz appeared on cue with another tray, this one bearing sliced cheese and a refill for the beer. Wolfe lifted his glass, studying me over the rim. Archie, be wary. If one may counterfeit your name, one may counterfeit your death. Comforting thought, I said. I'll order flowers in advance. He ignored the remark, retreating into his thoughts. The orchids upstairs would soon demand him, and I could tell he was counting the minutes till he could flee to them. I gathered the typewritten pages, stacked them neatly, and shut off the lamp. The last glow caught the edge of the forged certificate lying on his desk, a perfect lie in perfect print. The city outside went on breathing, its heart made of paper. The shot came just as I was locking the front door for the night. It was one of those crisp Manhattan evenings when the air tastes like burnt coffee and neon, and the street outside was quiet enough for a bullet to sound like an argument ending. I was halfway to the hall phone when the gate bell clanged twice, then a shout, and Saul Panzer's voice cut through the drizzle. "Archie, get Wolfe!" By the time I yanked open the door, Saul was already hauling a man up the steps, half drag, half carry. The fellow was pale, breathing like his lungs had lost the blueprint. His coat was soaked dark at the side. Under one arm he clutched a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Caught him at the gate," Saul said. "Somebody fired from the alley. He was trying to reach your doorbell." "Next time," I said, "I'll install an express chute." Between us, we got him inside. Fritz appeared from nowhere with blankets and a brandy tray, calm as an undertaker rehearsing. We stretched the man on the office couch. Wolfe was there already, expression unreadable, lips pressed tight enough to flatten a cigar. "Name?" Wolfe asked. The man's eyelids fluttered. "Message for Sergeant Goodwin, NYPD." His voice trailed into a gasp. "That's me," I said. "Sort of." He lifted the parcel with shaking fingers. I took it, and his hand dropped. By the time Fritz brought the brandy, it was too late. The man had delivered his last mail. Wolfe stood, every inch the magistrate. "Archie, examine the package, carefully." I slit it open with my penknife. Inside was a ledger briefcase, just like the one Saul had lifted at the officers' club. Same style, same kind of coded books. And atop it lay a folded paper, blotched with blood. I unfolded it gingerly. "Confession," I said. "Signed with a name I don't know. He swears the black market ring was financed through CCM, and that Mrs. Lena Goodwin managed the transfers." Wolfe's brows arched. "Indeed." "That's not all." I handed him the note. He mentioned someone called Captain G, the real one. The words hung there like smoke. Wolfe read it twice, then set it down, fingers steepled. Truth, he murmured, arrives, as ever, too late for the living. Saul exhaled. He was being followed. I spotted the shooter's flash from across the street, but by the time I circled around, the alley was empty. Wolfe nodded once. Archie, fetch Inspector Kramer. Sure, I said, but if I ever meet the other me, I'm charging him rent. He ignored that. You will call, not go. I phoned. The precinct promised Kramer would come personally. By the time the line clicked dead, Fritz had draped the body with one of Wolfe's least favourite throws, dark red wool to discourage sentiment. Wolfe moved to the globe stand and poured himself brandy, the liquid glowing amber under the lamp. Mr. Panzer, he said, you will remain until dawn. I expect further visitation is possible. Saul gave a curt nod. Archie, Wolfe continued, turning toward me, you will stay upstairs. The premises are compromised. Boss, I said, if I wanted to hide, I'd have picked a quieter address. Phooey, you will obey. Your resemblance, both physical and bureaucratic, to the dead impostor makes you a target. Look, I said, I've been shot at before. I can duck with the best of them. His eyes glinted behind the half-moon spectacles. You will not argue. Wouldn't dream of it, I said, which was true for about 5 minutes. By 1 a.m. Kramer arrived, trench coat glistening from the rain. For once no cigar smoke preceded him. He stepped inside quietly, his hat in hand, eyes taking in the body, the parcel, the papers. Hell, he muttered, your doorman's busier than mine. Inspector, Wolfe said evenly, I trust your men will handle the removal discreetly. The deceased was not our guest. Kramer gave him a tired look. I know, Wolfe, and for what it's worth, thank you for keeping the evidence cleaner than my own boys could. You even used gloves this time, I grinned. He's learning from me. Don't push it, Goodwin. He studied the confession, the ledgers, and finally the line about Mrs. Lena Goodwin. So the widow's the spider in the web, he said. Apparently, Wolfe replied, but her accomplices remain active. I suspect one is the hand that fired tonight. Kramer sighed. All right, I'll post men on the street. If anyone's gunning for your household, I'd rather have them arrested than fill out paperwork. An admirable sentiment, Wolfe said dryly. You have my gratitude. Kramer barked a short laugh. Never thought I'd live to hear that. He pocketed his cigar, still unlit, and turned to Saul. You saw the shooter? Flash only, Saul said. Could have been male or female. Figures. Kramer's gaze went back to the dead man. We'll take him quietly. He signalled the uniform outside and left without another word. Fritz disappeared to the kitchen. Saul stationed himself near the hall window. The house settled into uneasy silence. Wolfe stared at the note again, then rose and walked, slowly, ponderously, to the front room. His hand rested a moment on the closed door, as if the wood could explain the night. I waited till I heard the elevator hum, meaning he'd gone upstairs to his orchids. Then I tiptoed down from my assigned exile. The office lights still burned. I heard Wolfe's voice from the landing above, low and weary. The world's idiocies orbit one man. I don't know if he meant me or the corpse. Either way, I decided to take it as a compliment. Saul shot me a look. You're supposed to be upstairs. I was, I said. Gravity's a tricky thing. He didn't argue. Outside, the rain returned, soft and deliberate. Fritz reappeared with the brandy tray, steady hands, calm as ever. Mr. Wolfe has retired, he said. He asks that you rest. Sure, I said, right after I make sure my double doesn't come back from the dead. He gave me that gentle, Swiss disapproval that could shame a saint and retreated. I locked the front door, checked the window latches, and finally let myself sit. The couch where the messenger had died still held the shape of a man who'd carried truth too far. Upstairs, I heard Wolfe's elevator stop. Orchids don't sleep, but I figured he'd try anyway. The brownstone was quiet except for the rain whispering against the gate that had just tried to kill me. The day had started grey and finished greyer, the kind of Manhattan afternoon that looks like it's been washed in dishwater and hung out to dry. Inside the brownstone, though, things were heating up nicely. Wolfe's office looked less like a sanctuary of reason and more like a tribunal. The lamps were turned low, the curtains drawn, and Wolfe sat behind his desk like a monarch forced to judge the follies of men. I was at my usual station, notebook ready, trying to look intelligent. Saul was perched on the edge of a chair, his hat in his lap. Kramer leaned against the filing cabinet with his cigar unlit, which meant he was either showing respect or getting ready to blow the place sky high with temper. Wolfe's voice filled the room. "Inspector, the sequence is now ineluctable. The impostor's name, the widow's fraud, Mercer's profiteering, they converge upon one source, Captain Gerald Nash." Kramer frowned. "Never heard of him." "You wouldn't have," Wolfe said. "He vanished in 1945, nominally dead in a plane crash over the Adriatic. In truth, alive and industrious." He tapped a pile of ledgers on his desk. These were not Mercer's accounts. They were Nash's. I whistled softly. If imitation's the sincerest form of flattery, this guy's my biggest fan. Kramer shot me a look. "Don't start, Goodwin. You're lucky I don't book you for confusing the census." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Inspector, Mr. Goodwin's vices are many, but forgery is not among them, nor, I assure you, is treason." Kramer grunted, half an apology, half indigestion. "Fine. So Nash used Goodwin's identity?" "Precisely," Wolfe said. "The Belgrade file was convenient, a name already registered with impeccable service records. Nash altered a single serial number and appropriated it to sign military contracts that funneled stolen materiel into black market channels. When the trail grew too warm, he let his creation, our unfortunate double, take the fall." "And Mercer?" I asked. "An accomplice, later expendable," Wolfe replied. "Mrs. Lena Goodwin, the banker of the enterprise. The rest, victims of liquidation." Kramer exhaled smoke at last, the match flaring like Judgment Day. "So, where's this Nash now?" "In the city," Wolfe said. "I telephoned the War Department this morning. A requisition form bearing his authentic signature was filed yesterday under the name Captain Gerald Nash, Office of Strategic Material, Manhattan Division." Saul looked up. "So, he's not hiding?" "Not," Wolfe said dryly, "yet." At that moment the doorbell rang. Fritz appeared, face composed but eyes wary. "Mr. Wolfe, a gentleman wishes to see you. He gives the name, Captain Gerald Nash." Kramer stiffened. "What the hell?" Wolfe raised a hand. "Show him in, Fritz. And, Fritz, brandies, if you please." A few seconds later, a man stepped into the room, mid-40s, trim, uniformed in civilian grey with a military neatness that had survived peacetime. His hair was silver at the temples, his eyes calculating and cool. He carried himself like he still expected salutes. "Mr. Wolfe," he said calmly. "Inspector Kramer, Mr. Goodwin." "You're well informed," I said. He smiled faintly. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Goodwin, as does your name. I regret the inconvenience." "Sure," I said. "You steal a man's identity, let a few bodies pile up and call it an inconvenience. You must be a riot at reunions." He ignored that and turned to Wolfe. "I understand you've been investigating events connected to my, misused credentials. I thought it best to present myself before conjecture turned theatrical." Kramer stepped forward. "You're under no arrest yet, Nash, but that could change fast. We've got forgeries, ledgers, and corpses lined up like dominoes." Nash didn't flinch. "I expected as much. Unfortunately, I can only offer this. I am not the man behind these crimes." "Of course not," I said. "You're the other guy pretending to be you." He gave me a cool glance. "Sarcasm is a poor investigative tool, Mr. Goodwin. The truth is simpler. Someone else, someone with access to my pre-war files, used both our names." Kramer barked a laugh. "That's rich. You've been a ghost for 5 years, and now you're haunted." Wolfe's tone stayed measured. "Captain Nash, you claim impersonation, yet your signature appears on contracts spanning 4 years, each linked to embezzled government property." "Forged," Nash said. "I can prove it." Kramer leaned in. "So can we. The lab matched your thumbprint on Mercer's safe." That one landed. Nash's posture stiffened for half a second before he recovered. "A planted print. I was coerced once, threatened during an inquiry in 46. They may have lifted my print then." "By whom?" Wolfe asked. "By the same people who killed Mercer," Nash said quietly. "I came tonight to tell you that I believe your Mr. Goodwin is still in danger." I said, "He's got away with compliments." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. You expect us to believe you risked exposure merely to issue a warning? I expect nothing, but I know guilt when I see it, and I didn't shoot that man at your gate. I was followed here, I can feel it. Kramer snorted. You're feeling the noose tightening, that's what. Enough, Wolfe said, voice like a gavel. Captain Nash, please be seated. Nash hesitated, then sat. Wolfe regarded him the way a chess master studies an opponent who's made the right move for the wrong reason. You speak of fear, Wolfe said slowly. It does not suit you, yet I detect its scent, a tremor in your hand, a catch in your breath. Nash's jaw tightened. You're mistaken. No, Wolfe said. You're lying. The truth is that your conspiracy has devoured itself, and you came here hoping I'd shield you from its remains. You are bluffing, Captain, but not well. For a long moment, the room held its breath. The ticking of the wall clock sounded louder than rain outside. Finally, Nash exhaled, a long defeated sound. You're perceptive, Mr. Wolfe. I am bluffing. I didn't come to confess. I came to survive. Admirable instinct, Wolfe said, but survival demands candor. All right, Nash said. Yes, I used Goodwin's identity, but only after Belgrade. We were part of an intelligence network dismantling Axis fronts. When the war ended, our funding evaporated, but the assets, money, connections, remained. Mercer wanted profit, Lena wanted security. I wanted control. Kramer growled. And people died for it. Nash's eyes flicked toward me. I never meant for the imposter to die. He was a pawn. He got greedy, tried blackmailing Lena. She panicked. So she killed him, I said. Yes. Wolfe's brow furrowed. And you condoned it. I covered it, Nash said, to keep the Bureau away. I told her I'd handle everything, but Mercer began to unravel, stealing the ledgers. I couldn't stop it. Kramer stepped closer. You're confessing to conspiracy. Nash smiled faintly. I'm confessing to being a fool. I came here tonight because someone else, someone higher, has revived the operation. The name they're using now is mine again. If I vanish, the trail ends at your door. Wolfe's gaze hardened. Who? Nash hesitated, then shook his head. You wouldn't believe me. Try us, I said. He looked from Wolfe to me, and for a flicker, fear cracked through the mask. You wouldn't believe me because he's... He stopped. Outside, a car engine roared, then backfired. Nash jerked toward the window. Saul was faster. He moved to the glass, peering through the curtains. Black sedan just pulled away, he said. No plates. Kramer cursed. He was followed, damn it. Nash rose abruptly. Then I've signed my own warrant. Inspector, I'll surrender formally, protective custody. Wolfe inclined his head. A prudent choice. But, Captain, I warn you, if deceit persists, no custody will save you. Nash straightened his coat. Understood. He looked at me. For what it's worth, Goodwin, I didn't steal your life. I borrowed it. Yeah, I said. Next time try returning it in better condition. Kramer took Nash by the arm. Let's go before your fan club comes back. As the door closed behind them, Wolfe sat motionless, eyes distant. The office felt suddenly larger, emptier, as if Nash had taken a piece of the air with him. Saul broke the silence. You think he's telling the truth? Part of it, Wolfe said. The convenient part. What about the rest? I asked. The rest, Wolfe said quietly, remains unfinished and dangerous. He leaned back, fingertips touching. Archie, dictate a memorandum for the record. Title it The Reunion of Names. Note that our adversary may yet be at liberty, and perhaps within the law itself. I rolled in a sheet of paper and began typing. The clatter echoed like small arms fire. Wolfe reached for his beer, took one measured sip, and stared at the empty doorway where Nash had stood. The masquerade of men, he said, never ends. It merely changes costumes. I stopped typing. You want that in the memo? He gave me a look. No, that's for the orchids. And upstairs, I imagined, they were already listening. There's a certain electricity that hits the brownstone before one of Wolfe's finales, the kind that makes the orchids lean in their pots as if they know something's about to bloom. That evening, the office felt charged enough to light Broadway. Every chair was occupied, every suspect sweating under the lamps. Wolfe sat behind his desk, monumental as always, while I leaned on the globe stand with a pad in my hand, pretending to take notes and actually taking inventory of nerves. Inspector Kramer had planted himself near the door, trench coat off, cigar clenched but unlit. Lena Goodwin, black silk dress, sharp perfume, sharper temper, sat rigid as an icicle on the red chair. Next to her, Captain Gerald Nash looked like a man waiting for the firing squad, but trying to convince the audience it was all theatre. The room smelled of tobacco, orchids, and trouble finely cornered. Wolfe began without preamble. "This case," he said, "concerns theft not of money, nor of documents, but of identity. A man's name was taken, his history rewritten, his existence duplicated, until truth itself required resurrection." "Meaning me," I said. "Meaning you," he confirmed gravely. "But allow me to narrate," Kramer grunted. "Let him. Saves paperwork." Wolfe's eyes half closed, his voice unhurried and exact. In Belgrade, 1944, Captain Gerald Nash commanded an intelligence network trafficking in war materiel. When the war ended, the operation lingered, greed replacing patriotism. The key to laundering funds lay in the manipulation of personnel records. Nash required a clean name, unconnected, unexamined. He found one, Sergeant Archibald Goodwin, presumed stateside, file accessible, credentials impeccable. Nash's jaw twitched. "You can't prove that." "Proof," Wolfe said mildly, "is superfluous when truth suffices. You falsified the discharge, transferred supply authorizations, and conducted transactions through Carlton Central Metals. When suspicion arose, you contrived to erase your shadow by providing the world with a corpse." Kramer's cigar bobbed. "The dead man at Wolfe's house." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "The man who came here calling himself Sergeant Goodwin was not a criminal genius, but a victim, a mutilated veteran named Albert Henshaw, recruited by Nash's mistress, Mrs. Lena Goodwin." Lena's head snapped around. "That's a lie." "Phooey." Wolfe's tone could have wilted marble. "You furnished him with Archie Goodwin's army file, instructed him to deliver false papers to this house, and arranged for his convenient demise. In return, you promised him money enough to vanish." She laughed. "Too high, too late. Ridiculous. Why would I risk—" "Because," Wolfe cut in, "you discovered that your dear captain intended to disappear again, leaving you as expendable as Mercer. You thought to secure yourself with his ledgers. Alas, your pawns proved unstable. Henshaw threatened exposure. Mercer grew afraid, and both died. You, madam, survived. Until tonight." Kramer's hand twitched toward his pocket notebook. "You can back that?" "I can," Wolfe said, "through arithmetic. Every ledger recovered employs Nash's wartime cipher, column transpositions derived from unit code G7B. Only he and his Belgrade associates used it. The pattern is identical across every falsified document, including Sergeant Goodwin's file." Nash's face drained of color. "You can't know that." Wolfe allowed himself the faintest smile. "I can, Captain. Mathematics, unlike men, does not lie." For a moment nobody breathed. The clock ticked its satisfaction. Kramer broke the silence. "So the fake Goodwin, Henshaw, was Nash's patsy, killed to throw us off." "Correct," Wolfe said. "Nash lured him with promise of payment, arranged the meeting here under false pretenses, and administered poison disguised as brandy. Unfortunately, Henshaw's panic disturbed the script. He collapsed before completing his errand. The parcel he carried was bait, meant to incriminate the living Archie Goodwin." "Which," I said, "wasn't my favorite night's entertainment." Lena's voice wavered. "That's conjecture. You can't tie me to—" "I can," Wolfe said, "because the confession delivered at my gate was written in your hand. I compared it with letters seized from your apartment. You penned it to divert suspicion toward Nash, intending to barter the ledgers for immunity. But your courier was intercepted." Her face blanched. You can't." "Madam," Wolfe said, "I can. You see, you and Captain Nash share a singular weakness. Overconfidence." Kramer stepped forward. "That's good enough for me." He turned to Nash. "Captain, you're under arrest for conspiracy, forgery, and murder." Nash didn't move. His voice came low, brittle. "I should have burned everything." "Yes," Wolfe said, "but vanity demanded record-keeping. Criminals crave immortality." Kramer snapped open the cuffs, and the click echoed like punctuation. Nash glanced once at Lena, something like hatred or regret passing between them. "You used me," he said. She sneered. "We used each other." Romantic, I said. Remind me never to join your bridge club. Kramer led Nash toward the door. I'll have a squad car pick up Mrs. Goodwin once the paperwork's signed. Thank you, Inspector, Wolfe said smoothly. Kramer paused at the threshold. Nice work, Wolfe. You and me, same side once in a while. Occasionally, Wolfe conceded. After the door shut, the silence came back heavy but clean, like air after thunder. Wolfe leaned back, reached for his beer, and poured it with the solemnity of a benediction. Well, I said, that's that. I suppose I can stop wondering if I'm alive. You may resume being yourself, Wolfe said, eyes closed. That's a relief. It's crowded enough already. He grunted, which in Wolfian terms is affectionate approval. Archie, make a note in the case file. Title it, The Man Who Was Me. Already on it. I rolled the typewriter closer, the keys clattering like applause. Want me to include your speech about immortality? Phooey, no one listens to philosophy. I did, I said. And for the record, I prefer my identity unshared. He opened one eye, then cherish it, and cease jeopardizing it with impulsive excursions. That's me, steady as a roulette wheel. He sighed, almost smiling. You are incorrigible. Sure, I said, but it keeps you from getting bored. Fritz appeared at the doorway, timing as perfect as always. Dinner is served, gentlemen. Pot roast and pomme dauphine. Wolfe's expression thawed a fraction. Excellent. Inform Mr. Pantzer he may join us presently. He's earned his meal. When Fritz retreated, I set the finished page on the desk and stretched. You know, it's not every day you solve your own murder. Nor every day, Wolfe murmured, that one must prove one's existence. He rose, slowly, methodically, the great bulk unfolding like ceremony. Come, Archie, the orchids await their caretaker. Which one of us? I asked. The living one, he said, and took the elevator upstairs. I lit a cigarette, leaned against the desk, and let the smoke drift through the lamplight. Outside, the city hummed with its usual insomnia, indifferent to the names it mangled and the lives it misplaced. Inside, the brownstone was back to normal. No doubles, no imposters, just Wolfe and me, and the familiar weight of quiet triumph. Somewhere above, the elevator doors sighed open. The faint scent of orchids floated down, clean, civilized, unmistakably Wolfe. I grinned to myself, exhaled, and flicked ash into the tray. It's not every day you get to meet the man who was you and live to write about it.